So on your worldview worksheet, you probably filled out a few different events that you haven't thought about in a little while. Based on your generational perspective, this will really determine how you interact with the students, because they probably are coming from a very different perspective than you are. So most of our students are millennials, and most of us are Generation Xers or even baby boomers that are faculty or staff members. So millennial students, if they were to fill out this form, such as I have, would come up with some of the following. So for a major political scandal, they might come up with Monica Lewinsky or Bill Clinton and his impeachment. Also maybe O.J. Simpson, and that's kind of more a middle school experience, but that might come up as being on their consciousness in terms of a large scandal. Another thing for defining a historical event for them is definitely 9/11, hands down. Most of your students will say that, and even some of you probably feel like that was an important one, but that definitely will come up for your undergraduate students, which kind of speaks to their concern about safety and security and how they feel about their consciousness on risk management. So that might be a good way to start that conversation with them. U.S. military involvement is the Iraq War or Afghanistan, and so they probably don't even remember what happened in Vietnam or things like that. So your perspective is a little bit different there too. I think for undergraduates now, we've pretty much always been involved in a conflict in the Middle East, so that's something that they're used to. A technological innovation for millennials is definitely Facebook. And while it's not that recent that it was created, for them, they've always been in college with Facebook. They've always been able to text message. They've always been able to send emails. So these are all things that they expect. They expect instant gratification in terms of their electronics and their technology. Some national perspectives on diversity. There are significantly more minorities in various fields, particularly in broadcast television and communications. Even faculty and staff members we've seen up on the rise recently that these students are used to. They're used to a melting pot of people in the United States, and so that perspective is a little different perhaps from your growing up or your having experienced college life. And other generational moments that may have shaped their experience are cell phones, small cell phones, compact cell phones that fit in your pocket. Everyone has a cell phone, by the way. Touch screens on everything. And everyone has a computer. So when we really think about what our millennial students are experiencing and where they're coming from, generally, it's very different than where we're coming from and what our experiences were when we were their age. So it's really important that you really think about where you're coming from and where the students are coming from as we try to negotiate our needs with theirs in terms of running the organization to the best of its ability and really supporting our students in a way that is conducive to their learning experience. So working with millennials can sometimes be a little complicated. So really, as you're reflecting on what your own needs are as a member of your generation and how you perceive different things that you've experienced in campus life and currently, some of the things that characterized millennial students from the research included that they're special, or they feel special. They're sheltered, confident, conventional, team-oriented, achieving, and pressured. So the slides that you're seeing right now kind of go into detail about those items and what they really mean. But some of the ones that really pertain to what we do as student groups are the specialness and the team-orientedness. They really impact how they operate in student organizations. So in terms of the specialness, a lot of our students have grown up, whether they're an only child or not, their families are telling them, you're special, you're great, you're wonderful. They're used to getting awards for participating, not just for winning first place, which might be different than when you were growing up. When you played soccer, maybe growing up, you didn't get a prize if you just participated. You only got a prize if you won. So you're a little bit more focused on the achievement and the end goal, as opposed to our students who are more focused on getting an immediate reward for their participation with their student group. So they really like titles, they really like having positional leadership, and that to them is more important than the process, the learning process that comes along with planning an activity or successfully completing a task, because they're not getting any instant gratification. The other part, the team-orientedness, is also really important because some of our students who are millennials tend to be afraid of failure. So if they work in a team, there's less likeliness that they will fail miserably as themselves, and they won't have to face the humiliation of having not completed something satisfactorily if they've done it as a group. So sometimes if you ask an individual student to do something, they won't raise their hand or participate because they're being singled out. But if they can say, oh, my best friend and I will go hang up the flyers together, they feel a little bit more invested in the task because they don't have to do it by themselves. We also see this, as you've probably experienced either in your classrooms or doing workshops or meeting with students, they need their cell phones on them at all times. So that need for connectedness, to always have someone nearby to share their experience with or complain with or even be overjoyed with is all related to that team-orientedness. They need to be connected to people. So when we think about how we perceive things, we're taught to be a little bit more independent. A lot of us, if you have your advanced degree, nobody else did that dissertation but you. That was all you. You couldn't, lean on, your buddy from your cohort to take care of the work with you. You did your own research. So we're a little bit more independent. Even in the student affairs side of things, especially at a small university, we do a lot of things. So sometimes we really don't have the time or the energy, and other people don't either, to reach out to do things together. So our students behaving that way is sometimes strange to us, but we really need to identify how we perceive that behavior and how we can help the students become more independent based on what their experiences are as a member of their generational group to make them more effective and well-rounded student leaders. So one of the things that'll also be helpful to you as an advisor is there's an advisor checklist in your organization advisor manual. And if you go through it, there are 2 columns and a number of statements for which you to rate whether it's the student's responsibility, the student leadership team, or the advisor's responsibility for each statement. So you'd rank from 1 to 5 on the student side. If you feel it's totally the student's responsibility or more of a concern for the student versus the advisor, you'd rate it a 1, meaning absolutely the student's responsibility, definitely not the advisor's responsibility. 5 would be definitely the advisor's responsibility, definitely not the student's responsibility. So as you go through the list, take a moment to do it for yourself, and when you have a chance, do it with your students too. In advisor training, in person, we go through a few of them together, and there are some really thought-provoking ones. There's one that says, if an event is not well planned, whose responsibility is it to cancel it or decide what to do with the event? So you might feel like it's your responsibility, absolutely, to cancel the event if you think it's not planned well. But me, for example, I would say, unless we're expending an exorbitant amount of resources or it's costing us a lot of money, go ahead and do the program, because I want them to learn from the failure. As we know, millennials don't do so well with failure, and that's part of life. So really, depending on how your perspective is and how you would react to that, that's a good talking point with your students, especially in the beginning of the year when they start planning programs, and you might see them getting away from them. They've got, really big plans, but they don't have a lot of time to do all of the events they're planning. One that comes up really often is one of the larger topics on the advisor checklist, and that is, whose responsibility is it between semesters or academic years to hold on to the materials for the student organization? As a member of the university community, I'm sure you're aware that there is definitely a minimal amount of storage space on campus in terms of being able to store things over the course of the semester or even a summer. So your students might be fully expecting you to store a container full of dance costumes in your office over the summer. They might have that expectation. You may not have been planning to do that. So that's one of those things that tends to be that the students will totally rate that as the advisor's responsibility, whether they know or not. And the advisor will totally rate it as the student's responsibility without having communicated with the organization. So that's definitely one that comes up a lot, and one that you should definitely talk to your students about before the fall recital or before the end of the school year, so you're not stuck with the mascot head in your office over the summer. So also in this section of the advisor manual, there is a month-to-month advising guide. So these are just some things that the assistant dean for student life put together to help aid you month-to-month, literally, and how you advise the students. And so, for example, in the fall, first thing in the fall, they don't have much homework yet, so they're usually pretty excited to work on programs and work together. Generally around October, November, midterms or end of the year hits, family time, they're homesick. Some of those things tend to get in the way of them being effective leaders with their group. So sometimes, you know, as a faculty member, you might be teaching your own classes and you have your own stressors. And as a staff member, you might be going through the motions of planning for next semester already. So sometimes we forget about what the students are going through in their personal lives and how that sometimes affects whether or not they're being a good leader with their student group. So the month-to-month advising guide really helps you focus on some of the areas that we tend to forget about when we're working with students. So definitely take a moment to review that. The other thing that's really helpful is there's a list of suggestions for advisors, really to make you feel more confident with your advisor experience and help you make the most of your work with the students. So Student Life has compiled a list of 4 things that you should keep in mind to build successful advising relationships. The first is communicating effectively, honestly, and directly with your students. They can't meet your expectations if they don't know what you need from them. So make sure that you're available to them, either via office hours or you schedule time maybe to do coffee once a week or however often works for your group, to make the time to hear what they're going through and share with them your experiences and things that have gotten you a little distracted so that you're all on the same page and you're communicating effectively. Be clear about your expectations. Again, no one can meet your expectations if you haven't shared what they are to begin with. Same thing with the students. So if your students expect you to be at every single one of their meetings and they meet weekly, but you have class often or you have a family at home and you're not really available that often, it's really important that, especially at the beginning of the semester or at the end of the year before they go away for break, you're upfront about when you're available, when you're not available, and kind of expectations that you have for how often they'll meet and how often you can actually be there. One of the things I do with my group is I try to attend all of their general meetings, which is bi-weekly, before a major event. If there isn't anything major going on, I don't go. And sometimes that's for a break for me, but it also lets them just, you know, not feel that I'm watching over them and they can have a little bit more freedom. But I'm always just there so that if they need more information, they can ask me. The other thing is I sit in the back of the room, and so that's something to consider with your own group is expectations for how involved you are with the meetings when you are attending or programming when you are attending. So do they expect you to save the day if something goes wrong at their event? Or do they expect you to just sit back and let them have the experience and learn from it and help them debrief afterwards? So those are conversations you should have with your group. Keep it all in perspective. So some of us are very passionate about what we're doing with our student groups. It might be associated with something we value very personally or even with our academic discipline. So despite our zeal for whatever we're helping our students with, it's really important that we focus on the fact that this is really for their development. So outside of most academic groups, really the students are assembling because they feel passionate about what it is that they're working on. So it might be Phi Sigma Pi and they're a national honors group and they just like to work on scholarship ideas and they like to help students learn new things and that kind of thing. And maybe it might be the Biology Society, for example, and you have a lot of experience with the Biology Society and the students are excited to do their own projects. So sometimes, even with WAC, for me, I know a lot about theater and performances and, you know, live entertainment. So sometimes I want to do the programs that I'm excited about. But it's really important that we as advisors take a step back and really keep it in perspective that this is supposed to be about the students and expanding their horizons outside the classroom more than it is about us having the opportunity to do these really great things that we're passionate about with, you know, their time. So I think some of it has to do with finding a good compromise between your expectations and your needs or desires or excitement with the excitement of the students and trying to find a balance. And finally, have fun. This is a really great opportunity for you to get to know students outside the classroom and also for them to have the chance to have a mentor either in their field of interest or even just anywhere on campus. Again, our research tells us about students and their retention on campus that the meaningful relationships they have with faculty members and staff members outside the classroom, it's really what helps them decide that they're going to stay at the university and makes them happy here. So have some fun with it. You know, do some really exciting programs with your student groups, share some personal things with them, let them know about your experiences, appropriate ones, while you were in college, and help them have a good time. It's really about the fun.